When you're going to release a game, or when you're going to project a game, the platforms that it's going to be released, when is it going to be released, if it's going to be released. Because sometimes we start making games, we love games, we really like to deliver the best product, but we don't think, I think some developers don't think much about what is the best platform for my game. How I'm thinking about not only the game I wanna make and I wanna play, also about the player that is going to play that game. Is he playing the game in the right platform? I'm looking for the right audience in that platform for my game. So first thing I want to do is to introduce each one of you. On my side, Saulo is from Brazil, is from Brasilia. He's one of the first developers I knew. He's from Behold Studios. One of the first developers I knew in Brazil because of they were kind of a pioneer in the indie so-called indie wave of developers, because before indie was a word, a buzzword, you were already making games in 2008, 2007, if I remember well, and it wasn't until Knights of Pen and Paper when your name started to boom, and they are working a lot with the community in Brazil and Brasilia. And as we are looking back in time, we need to go very, very, very long ago to set the context of this video. It is about Christian Lykawka, that is founder of Rockhead, and he started in 96, 97 making games. So I think it's the most veteran game developer I know in Latin America. I don't know if we want to mention, because I don't know those games.
These are very old, right? And, well, in that time we didn't have access to all the technology and platforms we have now. For example, we made all the technology. In this case, this Aquarius game it was never published, so we failed a lot, of course, but we learned a lot. We developed our own technology that allow us to make some hunting games for Atari in that time, like some prototypes and etc. And in that time we worked a lot with PC and consoles. The best mobile game was the Snake in '96. So I think that's it. We can talk more.
The story I know is that you were looking for funding for that game called The Most Dangerous Game, and you started pitching that project at GDC or ECTS, I don't remember, and the person from the company, I think it was Atari, said, "Oh, that looks interesting, so vast terrain, an engine that is able to render a lot of terrain, and with very little effort." So like the guy called another superior guy in the company, come, take a look. And that guy said the same. Went to another guy in the company, a bigger guy, and come, take a look at this. And then the third guy, I think it was the third, said, "Oh, I think that engine will be perfect to make the next version of our Deer Hunter game." And you were like, "Oh my God, this is." We thought that they were going to fund our game and publish our game, but what they really want is our engine to publish or to develop the next version of Deer Hunter. But then you released some of the best Deer Hunter, the most acclaimed, critically and player acclaimed. Deer Hunter games, 2004, 2005, right? So made games for, I don't know, maybe every platform existing in the market since 96, or I don't know if you made game for the Game Boy or...
Yeah, DS.
Yeah, for Nintendo DS, 3DS. You also made games for console, PlayStation 2, Xbox, the first Xbox. Well, basically, South Logic, not Rockhead.
Yeah.
South Logic was among the three companies, the only three companies existing in Brazil, together with James, Continuum, and maybe that only those three.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, like basically you started the industry in Brazil. So this is what they are doing now. That has few things to do with that violent game. You have a very cute violence here. So it's now you you went to the mobile ecosystem and thought about how to apply everything you know from consoles, PC, and all the previous adventures on Starlight Adventures. Last but not least, we have the two of the three Coster brothers who are making games for 5 years, but not all of those 5 years are professionally, because you started as a hobby, doing game jams and kind of prototype experiments, and it was not until maybe 3 years ago that more or less.
We did start the studio 5 years ago, but we didn't have much success until about. Yeah. We did start the studio about 5 years ago. We were making games for mobile at the time, but we didn't actually have much in the way of success in terms of the ability to sustain two human beings until I guess a year in, and then finally to be able to grow the studio about a year and a half ago with our game Crashlands.
So here we have Crashland, that is your big title. That basically was the one that allowed you to grow the studio, not too much. An action RPG in an open world for mobile and PC. That is a quite complex game for a game made in Game Maker, if I remember well. So maybe it's among the 3 or 5 most complex Game Maker games around. But before that game, you have other mobile games that remind me, not only in the art, also in some mechanics to what you did here. So you were kind of trying to make the parts as polished as possible, and then put everything together with the open world thing. That something made me think that.
Yeah, I mean we were a huge fan of game jams, and actually every single one of our games, aside from this one, came out of a game jam context. So our first 2 games we made in 48 work days each. We built and published a game that ended up making money for us in as little as 8 hours, which we did on some Mondays sometimes. And so every so often when we're working on a bigger project, we actually take a break and essentially flex those creative muscles and make something weird in a day, and then if it turns out to be good, then we just publish it, or we spend some time polishing it up. And then Crashlands was our 5th one, actually. So we've made 4 games before this, all of which were free to play, and then we decided to ditch free to play to go premium because we wanted to go cross-platform from mobile to PC, which everybody who we talked to was like, "Don't do it, horrible idea." But we did, and it worked out fine. So there's that. I don't know what that means. We got another game in the works, so we're going to be able to test that theory and see if we're able to, ball of lightning twice. But we'll see what happens. You did the same? Yeah.
So, first thing I want to ask is, because I want to know first, we are going to talk about open questions. I have a script, but I want to be free in regarding what you want to hear. So I want you to raise your hand if you are working or already released, or are you in the mobile ecosystem. If you want to release mobile games, if you think you are going to pay your bills with mobile games. Can you please raise your hand? That's your target, mobile games. Who is thinking about console games? Who is focused on the console market? Okay, so we have kind of 20%. And who is thinking about PC as a primary platform? So we have PC and mobile. We have PC and mobile. A little bit thinking about, yeah. And who is thinking about both PC and mobile? PC and mobile. I don't know why.
I'm not thinking.
Wait, I don't know why the ones who are thinking about both PC and mobile, they did like that. I don't know.
You're not supposed to do it.
Yes, like, I hope nobody sees me, only Jesus. Because it looks like very complex, right? To release on both platforms. So I want you to explain how in the last 5 years things changed a lot. How, like in 2010, when you started, how did your mindset change regarding the platforms you were going to work your games for? Since then until now, how that evolved? And if you want to add something up to the context of your previous introduction.
All right, thank you. Yeah, when we started in 2009, iPhone was like a big thing. So, and at the same time, it was like, I think the most important or the biggest opportunity for like an indie studio or a small studio to launch a game like in 100 countries, like in a click of a button, you know. So the PC was we at that time we're not talking about like indie games yet. Indie games was like kind of a student project, small games, and maybe XNA and one Xbox with some games starting like to be like in their path to success. But at the same time, it appears like a new platform that it was open for developers. And anyone could like develop a small game and publish right away. And it was like this new thing that everyone was talking, and it was very different. So that's when we decided like, well, we want to make simple games. We want to create and have like the power to publish our own games. So especially in Brazil, because we don't have like opportunities of talking to publishers, or at that time it was like a very hard thing to do to get investment or to create a big project. So that's why we started doing mobile. And so 2009, 10, 11, almost till 12, we were just thinking about mobile, and we did a lot of games. And one of those games was Knights of Pen and Paper, and we did, the first launch was on mobile. It was a big thing, like 2 million downloads. It was like a $3 game, so it was a very big success for us, unexpected success for us. And like almost a year later, we released for PC. And on PC we did pretty well as well. On Steam we did 500,000 copies, so it was like, but we need like, we did actually a lot of changes to the games to be more like the PC player kind of game.
In the case of Rockhead, we started with mobile games in 2012 because the console and PC market was very tough in that time because publishers were afraid of mobile. Actually, they don't wanted to invest in PC and console anymore. And our background experience was almost 100% in PC and consoles. So it was a very challenging, it was a big challenge for us to understand how to bring our previous knowledge to this new platform. Of course, you can see many influence of our past projects in our current mobile games, but the most difficult change was the monetization, the business model, like the free-to-play. It was, we're still learning a lot. It changes along the time, and right now we are investing on the IP, the Starlit Adventures IP, because we understand that even if you don't sell anything inside a free-to-play game, everyone is looking at your IP, your characters, your universe. It helps to give some visibility in the future. People can recognize the same characters in other games we make. And to go in another media, like we are working on animation series for TV, and it's a different strategy, right? And about the other platforms, like PC and console right now, we are releasing like spin-offs of our mobile games. They are naturally fitting back to PC and consoles because of the previous background we had, I think. And we are adapting the content as well, like adding multiplayer for PS4. And one thing I think it's interesting is to talk with other publishers, other developers, and if you find someone with the skills to port your game, already made PS4 games, it's interesting to try to make projects together. Like you can revenue share, and there are lots of business models you can combine two companies. You get a mobile game and bring to other platforms with more people helping you. That's it.
Yeah, so we hit mobile first back in 2012 because I actually couldn't do art at the time we started the studio. I'm the artist. He could hardly program, so we looked around the market and we saw mobile and we were like, that's clearly where we belong. It seems like the quality of the things generally that's there. And so we thought that's the only place that'll take us. And so we launched a premium game actually first, and it just completely flopped. And then we pivoted to free-to-play with our second game, and then stayed there for a bit up until we figured out enough about how the market actually works and had the redundancy of being able to launch on Steam, because at that point, 4 or 5 years in, we figured our skill level, our quality bar was high enough that we could actually sell the game to PC players. You'll hear a lot about how, depending on like the time of the month or like the quarter, certain games are dying. I think single player died a couple weeks ago. Premium dies about every 2 weeks or so, depending on articles you read. The reality is it's hard. The whole thing's just very hard. And so what we've seen in the last couple of years is the reality is that there's still just more and more and more games coming out on mobile. I think when we started it was about 500 a week. Now it's about 750 a day, which is weird. And having to deal with that has been a whole other thing. And so that's where our focus on the multi-platform strategy has come from, actually. It's to put multiple eggs in multiple baskets so that any one destruction on a particular platform doesn't sort of echo into the other ones. And so we put a ton of focus onto the multi-platform aspect and then sort of carrying our players forward. Because what we've seen is that even though sort of the general idea of how, say, a PC player thinks about mobile, which is generally like, oh, mobile games are trash, which you'll get a lot actually if you do publish a mobile game on Steam or something that looks equivalent. What we found from our own analytics is that if we have people who sign up for our in-game services, is that about 1/3 of the people who are on Steam go and buy the game again on mobile. So in other words, you hear a really loud noise from a small minority of players on a given platform, but the reality is often quite different, and it's hard to see it until you kind of get in there and are playing the dangerous game of trying to run a studio or launch games.
Yeah, so kind of jumping onto what Sam was saying about when we first started, just looking at what our options were. It was also the case that this was before Steam Greenlight, and for us it was actually just what are we allowed to put games on, and it was literally just mobile. So we kind of just didn't have a choice, actually, and that's about it.
Can I make a comment about it? One thing that it's very interesting is when there's like some new studios that are like just starting to create their first game, they're kind of trying to understand what is right and wrong. We're like, oh, I should do free-to-play mobile, and like premium and mobile are dead or something like that. And that's actually not true. Like in my perspective, there's like it is actually very simple, very easy to find an example that contradicts every rule that people are like saying in articles in the web. So if you think like, for example, if premium, you can sell a premium mobile, you can see like Monument Valley, for example, is selling. And there's actually a lot of games that are going like for $7, $8, $10 tier now. And Apple and Google are actually trying to increase the amount of games that sells for $7, $8, or $10. So there's not a right and wrong path, I think. Usually in our process of creating, we first think about the game first. First it's game design, first is like the game concept. And then afterwards we start thinking, what is the business model, what is the target audience, where is where that target audience is playing their games, where they're like finding their games and how they want to play their games. So usually it's quite the opposite that usually most of the beginners are doing. They're actually kind of doing the opposite, like, oh, there's this new opportunity of creating free-to-play games and on mobile, so I'm going to start thinking about a new free-to-play game on mobile. So it's quite the opposite of the other way that we do it.
So there is no right or wrong path. The point here is what I believe is are you good at making? So for example, the whole studios, they were totally fans of RPGs, so they had the idea of what if we make a game about players, RPG gamers playing an RPG. Yeah, a tabletop RPG, and that was the main idea behind Knights of Pen and Paper, and something that never did before, nobody did before, right? So that was something that Paradox believed in, because I think the story is like the guy from Paradox was on the plane after SB Games 2012, if I remember well, and then when they came to Stockholm, I think it was Stockholm, he sent you an email right after arriving home saying, we want to publish this. And then the rest is history, as people say. Right? You sold like 1 million or more than 1 million copies on mobile after few months. And then Chroma Squad follows a little bit of that path. That is the meta, the simulation or the management of a Sentai studio. Power Rangers and all that stuff. So you kind of discover your audience making what you love, and this is something you always share with them, making what you love.
Yeah, we learned this like 5 years ago about the 3 rules of what games should an indie do. Like the first rule is you should like playing that type of game. The second is you should like creating that type of game, and the third one is you should understand the type of game that you're creating. So basically, when we're creating like a first-person shooter, if you like just play first-person shooter but you don't know how it works, you're probably going to just repeat some of the mechanics like without depth, without knowing it like for sure how it's going to happen in the core. So you can make changes like to this. If you change the core mechanics, you actually like making your game worse. You're not understanding like the essence, like the core principles of the design. So basically, I like this idea of like you need to know how to play it. We need to understand the type of game. We need to like creating. Because if you're staying like for 2 years doing one project, it's better that you like that project, not like
So speaking of no right or wrong way to do things, so we actually try to make games that we don't like. Specifically because people when they make games, they tend to make games in a specific genre, and they kind of incorporate all the rules of that genre because they're in love with those rules, right? And so we actually try to find things that we aren't comfortable playing, or that kind of aren't very fun, so that we can try to find, like, what is it about this kind of a game that is just sort of rubbing us the wrong way, And we figure if we can kind of shave off those rough edges and just make a much better experience that we would enjoy, then maybe we can open up that genre to a lot more people. So that's how we do it with some of our games, and other of our games just emerge kind of randomly. So those are our two kind of approaches that we take.
I think in our process in the studio we love to prototype and play even without graphics, with something very simple, and find the core of the fun before moving on. I think this is our strength.
Yeah, so surviving in a market that is changing every year, if not every 6 months, and is super oversaturated, it's really hard. We're moving towards a kind of a different mindset here in this panel, but in the end, I think we can talk about the technical challenges of your game. There are challenges of your game, but we can enter in that area. But I believe that when we are thinking about releasing a game on different platforms, we are also thinking about how the market is going to be in 2 years, how the market is going to be in 3 years, how VR is going to be, VR games are going to be seen or are going to be bought in 3 years. I want to risk into that. I want to put all my eggs into that basket. So that is the question I wanna make you. What was the kind of point in your career so far when you had to put things in a basket and you thought, no, better be more conservative, or if you take the risk of putting all the eggs in the basket, it was good, it was bad, because we cannot predict the future, but we can learn from how they think.
Yeah, one thing that I really like, for example, GDC, like Game Developers Conference, is that when you go to a conference like that, you're actually seeing the future of the market, right? If you're like just seeing the news, the media, and seeing what everyone's playing, the YouTubes are playing, you're actually seeing the past, like, because for the past 2 years, the companies have been working on that games, and now you're seeing like what they released. But when you're like going to like a conference or a summit that we're talking with other developers, you're actually seeing the future, right? For example, GDC now is like VR, like VR everywhere. And you go to the markets, like no one is playing VR right now. Actually, almost no one has a VR set in their home. But at the same time, you have like I think the 20 most biggest company in technology in the world that are working with VR, and you go to like a GDC in a conference like that, and everyone is talking VR. So probably in the next 2 years, we're going to see like a big change. And so if you to see the future, I really think that you should like be with the developers, you know, to understand what you're trying to do, etc. But yeah.
Well, I think some risks can be, you can measure a little better, thinking like some genres of games, some types of games, I think they will last for many years. And right now you can have like updates that you can change a little bit for there and there. So today this kind of risk is reduced. But in terms of like a startup studio, I really recommend that you, if you don't have enough resources to start your own game, to start doing games for other companies or projects, work for hire. In parallel, you can work on your own games. And this is good for of course, funding the company if you don't have enough investment from outside. But it's also interesting because you learn a lot from the other projects, something that you will never see for yourself, like VR, for example, or any technology you can imagine, like QR code. You have some client that wants QR code, then you have this knowledge, and your game can have maybe QR code, I don't know, just a silly example, but I think it's a good strategy to start a studio.
Work for hire is someone paying you to learn, right? So it's a good way to think about it. I think when we think about the future market, it sort of underscores one of the principles that is at the heart of our studio, which is speed. So we make games really fast. All of our focus is on process, on getting that time from one art asset creation down from, say, 22 minutes to 19 minutes. Really trying to carve out all that time because of the fact that the market shifts so rapidly in the games industry that the game that you start making for a particular market is going to enter a completely different market by the time you get it out. And that's utterly terrifying, I think, most of the time. And then when you think about the fact that there's this problem of what's called simultaneous invention. So if you know the story of like the invention of calculus, for example, two people actually came up with it within a very short period of time. And this is back when people couldn't share notes very easily. And so the reality is, and I'm sure we've seen a lot of these, I think the mobile wave that just sort of finally crashed recently. Everybody's making MOBAs, and then we had a bunch of these first-person shooter, sort of weird other twists on that, other things like that come out. And Overwatch killed all of them, and then because they all launched within like almost 2 or 3 months of each other. And those things take years to make. And so it's really weird when you see this thing happen where all of a sudden there's this wave of a particular genre coming. And it's because it actually started, say, like 2 or 3 years ago when someone spotted that hole in the market. And so if you're not fast enough to be one of the first people in a particular new wave that's coming on, then you're going to have a really rough time entering the market. So we always think about it in terms of we don't worry about predicting the future. We find what we think is a classic sort of genre or a game that has some classic appeal. And then we just build it as quickly as possible to get it out.
Yeah, so one other thing that our studio does is we try to find ways to insulate ourselves from trends in the market. And the biggest thing that I think everybody should be concerned about is just the sheer volume of games that are coming out. Because the same number of feature spots on Steam or on the App Store or whatever are available today as there were 5 years ago, and 5 years from now that may still be the case. And so the question is, if there's 1,000 games coming out every day, how do you get a feature spot? Because it becomes less and less likely every year. And so we've put a lot of investment into developing our own back-end web technology so that we can have a bank of users who we can send emails to whenever we launch new games. And so that's, we have those kinds of strategies that we have to make sure that we can sort of launch our games ourselves without being so reliant on those feature spots.
One more comment. Without going into like philosophical or questions like that, I was thinking about Joseph Campbell and the myth. I don't know if anyone's read the book, but the idea is that the myths that we see, like from the past, from the ancient, from the classical ages, they have this idea of telling universal stories, stories that transcends time and space and cultural aspects. And one thing that we use that in our studio is that if, like for example, we have probably more than 30 or 40 ideas of games that we want to do, but we actually put every game under the how to say that?
Under
the desk, yeah. And we wait like 1 or 2 or even 3 years, sometimes 5 years, to see if that ideas are still like good ideas, and if they're like transcending time, like there's still good ideas there in that under the desk. Actually, that are the ones that we should do. Like Knights of Pen and Paper and Chroma Squad are both like that. We actually had this idea like a couple of years before starting the project, and when we started the project, we thought that the ideas sounded like new and cool, fun,
I don't know if somebody here knows about a game called Outcast that was released recently, called Second Coming or Second, I don't remember, Second Encounter or something like that. It was a game released in 1999 by Infogrames, I believe, made by a Belgian team, and it was the first game featuring an open world, completely story-driven, and where every character was reacting differently depending on what have you done before. Something like Skyrim or Elder Scrolls did afterwards, with vehicles. You had some animals you could ride, and that game was not a success. Was not a complete failure, but was not enough to keep the studio keep working on more games. So now it's released, after a remake in CryEngine that looks beautiful, and it's still fun, but because it's a remake, you don't have the same things that all the open world games and type of similar games have at the moment. But I think that title illustrates perfectly how is that concept of being before your time, being anticipated to your time. And sometimes the market is not ready to play certain games. But now I want to ask you a very particular question is, how do you adapt? You have a game, you have a game, you have a game. They have the same game, or at least it's called very similarly, and they are going to release, or they've already released, that game on mobile and console. You are going to release the Starlight Adventure on PlayStation 4, and they already released games on console. And I want to know, in the particular case of Christian has a long story of releasing games for many consoles, and they are putting all their knowledge into this mobile game that was released two years ago, and now in another platform that was completely different to what they were working before. But you were working on Pixel Shaper, yeah. But what I mean is that you are learning a lot about the mobile platforms, and you are now, for the first time, publishing a game of your own after many years doing console games. So I want to put this in context, because I think it's a very particular context that I want you to emphasize on that. And what did you learn from the console, the previous history on consoles? So when you're facing a new audience, how do you think about the design of your game, the art of your game, how do you adapt your game to a certain audience? Like you had a nice pen and paper on mobile, and then, okay, I will release this game on PC. Click on Unity, PC version. I'm sure it was not like that. So I want to know this process. I think more people here could be curious to know that. And the inverse process is like, I have Starlight Adventures on mobile, free to play, and I'm going to release Starlight Adventure on console, also free to play, right? So it's not a button. So I want to know, and the same, right? You release first on mobile and then on PC. Simultaneous. Okay, so we have every way. We have simultaneous first on mobile, first on mobile. No, first on mobile. Yeah, the other. Yeah, so please tell us.
I think the first challenge was to adapt a portrait mode to a landscape mode again. So we have to redesign all the interfaces. And before that, we made an Apple TV version that helped a lot to this step, and it was like months of work, rework. And to adapt the controls, of course, you cannot touch the screen to select, and you need a cursor to navigate. And we had to think of some different ways to play the game. One is the multiplayer with multiple controls. It's a co-op version. Hopefully it will be very interesting to play at home with our parents or friends. And the game being free to play, it's our learning from the last years that we are trying and see what happens on PS4. We hope it will work. And again, we want to at least have many players knowing that game. So this object is very important for us to be in the platform, to be visible with this game. And then to at least get break even, which is all the money that we are investing returns. That's it.
Yeah, we had actually a lot of problems with multi-platform games. We did, I think, almost everything. Free-to-play on mobile, premium mobile, first launch on mobile, then PC, then console, then we did first PC, then mobile and console. We did like everything, like the whole thing. But we had a lot of struggle. I think the first factor, like the most obvious, is the input controls, right? The gamepad and the mouse and touch are so different. The way the interface works, the user experience, the menus are so different. And every time that we do games and we got inspired by the designs and create the games, and usually we go for mouse or touch like way of thinking. And then when we start thinking of adding like a gamepad or controller support, we're like, oh no, we need to do everything again, or like this doesn't work. So it's usually very hard to do that stuff. So basically our most successful games for the past 7 years, they're all like that. So every time that they're going to consoles, like it's not even console, but the gamepad on Steam as well, like the big picture, is also like a big problem for us. Every time we have problem with gamepad. I'm starting like this rule in the studio that we need to have a gamepad on like every computer, so everyone is always testing or thinking about the controller when they're creating the game. And yeah, but also we have some different aspects, like for console, like a year ago we did the first porting by ourselves internally in the studio, and the certification process was like so hard, like so difficult. It was, I think, 6 months probably, like to do the whole thing, like to do the gamepad, and then starting the certification process to be approved by Sony and Microsoft to get your game like released on the stores released. And even after that, if we want to publish like a patch or updates to fix some small bugs or something like that, it's like a whole new process of like certification all over again. And to work with a publisher, it was Bandai Namco, and the publisher was like, he has to maintain the every time that we work on a patch or fix, and we need to be approved first by the publisher and then by Sony, so it was like very, very hard to do everything. And so now we decided not to do porting anymore, never. So yeah, now it's work for hire. We hire some other studio or a publisher to do that for us. And I was talking to someone this morning, is that one thing that we realized is that when we're going to a different platform, if the game is going to be changed, like in any way, like in a feature or an interface, like a menu or anything, it's going to be changed. We want to do that. We want to change the game to be like good for that platform. But at the same time, the other process that is just the certification process, we're not going to do anymore. So we're hiring someone or having a different studio to do that for us. And this is like this is very good for us because we're very small. We have just 10 people on our team. So to do the porting in-house is very difficult, very hard.
Totally agree.
Yeah, I think in our case, doing the simultaneous Android, iTunes, Steam, and then Humble as well on the same day was a bit much. But we're actually going to add, I think, a console to that for the next one to see what happens. But I think a big part of it for us was actually just asking questions to other devs. So a huge part of these events is just to get some email addresses from people who know some stuff. And then when you're about to launch your game, you say, hey, we're about to put it on PC, what should we be wary of? What should we watch out for? So we didn't do that. We launched on PC, and we got slammed for controller support. And again, the game was actually designed to be played just with a mouse, which was great because we got a bunch of like the advocates from the like disabled gamers. Like they loved it because, of course, it was very easy for anybody to play. And it actually took us a ton of design work to streamline what is essentially a monstrous crafting RPG into a single input click thing. So we ended up doing the controller support, which took 300 hours. Also taught us a lot about how not to do our controls in the future, so it should be much easier next time. But when we ended up launching it, one of the really interesting things that happened was we got a review from PC Gamer, and they said, this game's really good, but you know, we can kind of see that it comes from mobile. It feels kind of simple. And so we saw that guy at a conference we went to. He sat down, same reviewer, played it with the new controller support that wasn't out yet. And the first question he asked was, "This feels a lot more complex. Did you guys add any systems to this?" And we just said, "No, we broke that one button into 14 and made you hold it with 2 hands, rub it all over the place." So of course it feels more complicated. And that's the thing to know is that what the different audiences are looking for is basically what it is. You got to key into what's important. Things like having a blown out menu that has all of the graphics settings that don't mean anything to most people is incredibly important. Because if you watch any Twitch streamer, for example, when they first boot up a game, they go in the menu, right? Any PC gamer who's worth their salt goes into the menu first to figure out what the settings are that they can play. We'll talk about this a bit in our talk tomorrow, but we even do stuff like set the settings just on low or medium, because people like cranking that up, you know? Just let them have the satisfaction of owning an expensive machine. Can we auto-detect these things? Yes, but we don't. So I think that's a big part of it, is just learning what those expectations are for your audience. And we didn't do it at all, and we definitely got slammed for it. So a big part of it is either just like looking through Steam reviews to see what people are complaining about, or just send a note to someone who knows some stuff, has been around the block a few times, and they're always happy to help from our experience.
What about the pricing?
Oh yeah, pricing. So we did different pricing too. So the game's $15 on Steam, and then it was $5 on mobile. Do you do the same thing? Yeah. So everyone again told us a horrible idea. It was fine. Would it work for you? It's fine for us. There we go. Okay. Oh, they did? Yeah, everyone just kind of bought it again, I guess. And the way we talked about it was like, well, we think it's a $20 game. So you buy both of them together and you get the full package. People are like, that makes sense. So you need to have thought about it and have to think about the angle, right? For sure. Because if they come at you and say, hey, why is there a price difference? A lot of people ask about features. And then we have to be like, no, there's actually no difference between the two. It just is more expensive because it's a bigger screen. We have to push buttons. You need to have some sort of rationale for it.
Yeah, then from a general design perspective, kind of the way we go about it is we start by thinking about mobile first, because that's the most constrained interface, right? Because you don't have, well, nowadays you don't have any buttons, I guess, or corners. So yeah, the iPhone keeps deleting things. So we start there, because if we can get something with a really smooth user experience that you can do by just tapping on something with a single finger, then it's easy to just slap a hotkey onto that for PC and then display a little hotkey indicator or something next to it. And then controller support is kind of a whole different beast, but we have a couple of rules that we try to go by when we're adding controller support, which is because the game is available on, say, Android and iOS and PC, somebody can just plug a controller in at any random moment and start trying to play the game with it. And so we have these rules where we try to make everything dynamic and responsive, where as soon as we detect a joystick input, the user interface reorients itself and changes to be a controller interface. And you see controller hotkeys pop up and things switch position to be in the shape of a D-pad instead of tucked into corner like they were before. So we want everything about it to be really, really smooth for the user.
You touched the last point. Basically, I was going to ask you what happened with that journalist, because I found that that quote. Basically, yeah, PC Gamer awarded your game Crashlands with 73%, saying fun combat, great writing and great look, but with pacing and progression tuned for a mobile experience, not the PC, as it turns to be out to be more predictable and repetitive. So you can see how that changes with the controller, right?
So I mean, the interesting thing about that is I think they blamed some of our design failings on about that it was on mobile. Which, frankly, it was just our fault that it had some bad pacing. Had nothing to do with mobile. We're just not that good at design at the time. So I appreciated that there was a scapegoat, for them to blame everything on. But the reality was, it was weird because the adage is that if you're building a game for mobile, then you build for 3 to 5 minute sessions, right? No longer than that, because no one plays for that long. From our metrics, the reality is that people will play for however long you design your game to be paced for if you pace it effectively. So our people on mobile tend to play actually for somewhere between 25 to 40 minutes, which means that it's much more about the game than it is about anything else. So that was a very good critique by PC Gamer. We actually made a bunch of changes after that because of it.
Last question for you too, because I wanted to kind of be at the same level of game design feedback when you are doing your ports. Have you changed something specific in your games, game design wise, from one platform to another, like making the sessions shorter, changing the game design, like not only technical?
Yeah, we did a lot of small changes actually. The first that I remember is that we had this feature on Knights of Pen and Paper. It was the blacksmith. The game was for mobile, and back then in 2011, the idea was to have the short experience, and the user would put on a sword to the blacksmith to create the sword, and he went in 24 hours the sword is going to be completed. So you kind of turn off your phone, and then the other day you come back and get the sword to keep on playing. And when we went to the PC, we actually thought that feature doesn't make sense for a PC player, that he wants to play the whole thing. So we changed a lot of things, but after that we actually changed the mobile as well. We thought it was a better experience to think as a PC player would like it, and then we changed on PC as well, and on mobile as well, and everyone liked it. So there's a lot of other changes during this process.
For us, it was very similar. We had a life system like in Candy Crush, in Starlit Adventures. We removed that, and we replaced it by a continue. You can use tokens like coins to continue the game when you fail. It's more appropriate for consoles, I think.
So this is all. I want to end this panel reminding that there is from the workshop we have at the event, and that you may already attended. There is one that is still free from those two pretty beautiful and amazing guys who we have here. And if you liked what they've been talking about, I think you will enjoy the workshop on Friday, because what they are going to do is to talk face to face with you, with not only the people who work at companies as an employee. It will be also focused on the professional who wants to drive his own company, who wants to start his own business, and they will carry you along their story, making games since the very beginning, through different stages, and ask you, what will you do? This is what we did, and how we fix that. What's your problem? So it will be basically a continuous interaction through their story, kind of an interactive post-mortem, and you will be able to share your post-mortem with them. So I invite you to check out the workshop, because it's really worth it. I really think so now, and now more after the panel. I think it was very insightful what you mentioned, and all of you both too. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for coming, to you too.